I'm going to be a stand-up guy with a wife and 2 kids to worry about. I already had made up my mind that I would make a deal with them. The minute I saw them following me, I said, what the hell? I mean, what am I going to do? Pull out a gun, start shooting? Okay. So they were searching the place with my permission, and I had gone back to the pretty complex math of mixing a week's supply of baby formula.
You sure we got the right guy? He doesn't seem like a spy. Taking care of a baby? His wife's sick in the hospital?
She got a couple of books by Karl Marx.
Oh, you bet. Can't understand history without him.
What's his membership card from the International Workers' Order?
Yeah, we joined that to get cheap medical insurance. I quit once they put it on the subversive list. I voted for Truman.
You told them you voted for Truman?
Yeah.
And you thought they'd be impressed by it?
No. I didn't think so.
So why did you tell them?
Well, you tell them a thing like that, it makes you not on the other side. You're basically on the same side.
We found a cache of 2 dozen photographs, including photos of David and his wife in Albuquerque. We gave them to Agent William Norton, who was stationed right downstairs. I got a screwdriver, and I jimmied the latch of a footlocker with a screwdriver so they could look inside.
How smart.
Yeah, my wife and I wrote a lot when I was in the service, but they're pretty personal.
In fact, it was his wife's big obscene open mouth lipstick print on one of them. Real hot shot. We took them as evidence.
We suggest you come downtown with us to continue the conversation. We'll be more comfortable there to try tying up some loose ends without the children and other distractions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll call my mother-in-law to tell her to take care of the kids. It was drizzling outside, and we strolled casually to the car, about as casually as 2 FBI agents with a suspected spy can. They put me in the back seat. I took a last look at my home, and we drove away.
Crossfade, FBI office now.
You hungry?
Oh, you bet.
So what do you want?
I don't know, hamburger maybe, and coffee?
Get him a couple of burgers. Go to the Wops.
Lights out, then right back up.
I was on my 2nd burger when the phone rang.
Ring. Lewis answers it. Listens.
Okay, thank you, Rod.
Hangs up the phone, turns to Krupkin.
Harry Gold identified him.
They look at David. He has stopped eating. A long, still, silent moment, then a little shrug. What can he say? Lights out and back up. David has been confessing for about an hour.
I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. It was irresponsible. It was gross negligence, really, on the part of the government not to give our allies the information. I'm telling you all this, by the way, on the understanding you will never, ever charge my wife with anything. Is that understood? Is it?
It's not up to us. But I would think a good lawyer could work that out for you. Well, what about your sister Ethel? Was she involved at all?
Nah. She's just a housewife.
Couldn't you have just said, okay, you got me, Harry Gold is right, I gave the information to Harry Gold, and that's all I know?
Don't you see how stupid that would have looked? Who came to Harry Gold? How did I know Harry Gold? I would have been in such a web of lies. And then they would have had the threat of my wife. They would have said, she doesn't know about this and all that, and they would have taken her and questioned her. And my wife would have told them and would have put herself in trouble because my wife was very straightforward. She would have tried to save me, and we would both be in trouble. Anyway, the first story I told them, I left my wife out completely, and Ethel, too.
But Julius...
I told on Julius, because he's not related to me in any way. Especially after the big fights I had with him over the Berlin area.
And the business.
Yeah, fights over the business. And even earlier, I was very angry that he spoke to my wife about it. Why he did that, I will never know.
Why did he, instead of just writing to you or waiting until you had a furlough?
Because he's an idiot! What can I tell you? He is basically an idiot.
Listen, you're Jewish. I'm Jewish. What was there about America that made you feel that you had to be a communist?
Hard to know where to begin. sense of justice, I guess. I didn't like what the Depression was doing to the little man. And then I encountered anti-Semitism in the army, in school. When I was going to school, I encountered Nazis.
In America?
Sure, in America. I got beaten up by people because I was Jewish, right on the Lower East Side. Three Italian fascists beat me up because I was in a parade against fascism. They didn't know I was a communist. They just beat me up because I was Jewish.
And that could never happen in Russia.
Anti-Semitism is illegal there.
So that's why you betrayed the United States.
I had no idea about betraying the United States. All I had in mind was helping a guy that was in a war fighting the Nazis. I called Ruth's brother. Sorry to bother you so late, but they're arresting me, and I only got one call. Can you do a couple of things? Can you call Ruth's mother and tell her I won't be home tonight? And there's plenty of formula in the icebox. And I'm going to need a lawyer. Call O. John Raggi. He defended the Trenton Six. And call Ruth. She's at Governor Hospital. Her burns got infected again. Tell her I gave the FBI a statement so she doesn't have to. Understand that is very important. And tell her not to worry.
Crossway, David is meeting with his lawyer, Raggi.
You fingered your wife as an intermediary and blamed the whole thing on your brother-in-law. I fail to see how you've outwitted the FBI.
I joked with these guys. I know what they are and who they are.
You recognize you've made it very difficult for me or anyone to help you.
I do, but I am really only concerned about my wife. I want you to work that out.
I'll try.
No, you gotta do more than try. You don't know how that woman has suffered. She caught fire. I can't bear it. I will kill myself if they charge her. They won't have anyone to testify. Tell them that.
Would you?
Nah.
Did you ever try suicide?
No, of course not. What? Do I look like the suicidal type? No. And I'm not. Believe me. I want you to get in touch with Julius. I want him to put up the money for everything. Bail, lawyer, the whole works. I am here because of Julius Rosenberg.
On the other side of the stage, the FBI is questioning Julius.
I have no explanation for why he would say that, but I'm entirely innocent. Bring him here, let me say it to my face.
If we do, he repeats the accusation eyeball to eyeball.
I'll still deny it unequivocally. I'm not going to lie.
They stripped me of my shoelaces and belt and put me in a cell.
Have you ever been in jail before?
No.
Crossfade, the FBI agents are themselves wearing them. They've been questioning Julius for hours.
The whole thing is implausible from the start. For God's sake, I don't even know any Russians.
You give us permission to search your apartment.
No, why should I? Go to a judge, get a warrant. I'm not answering any more questions until I talk to my lawyer.
The phone rings. Agent Fratkin answers.
Your lawyer.
Man, I don't know, I'll ask. Am I under arrest?
No.
They say no. Okay, gentlemen. Bye.
He walks away from them. Ethel appears. She and Julius stare at each other with great meaning and love as the light grows, and then fades. Crossfade. Ruth and Tessie are whispering when Ethel enters. They fall silent.
You've got to tell the police what you know or you're going to burn in hell like your husband.
But Mama, I've lived with him. I know he didn't do those terrible things.
Oh, Mommy.
Crossfade. Ethel and David's wife speak privately.
My lawyer said I should get your assurance David won't talk. The most he'll get is a couple of years.
Oh, that's all? Are you nuts?
Well, that's terrible, of course, but in the long run, we'll all be better off.
What is this we shit? What did Julius tell them?
They questioned him all day, but he said he was innocent, and they released him.
They questioned him about David?
Yeah, but Julie said he knew nothing about that. So if he continues saying he's innocent, and Doobie doesn't implicate him, it'll strengthen their position, and everybody will stand a better chance.
Yeah.
You probably think it stinks for David to take the blame for two. We gotta stick together. Not give him any more information, okay? Tell me my brother won't talk. especially on you. So listen, if you ever need to get away for a few days, recuperate, avoid the press, whatever, I'm happy to babysit.
What did you say?
Why don't you go away for the weekend? We'll take care of the kids.
No. What? I said no.
Why?
Because you'll hold them hostage.
Are you crazy? I would never.
No?
She didn't want to take those kids to help my wife out. It was to have a sword to hold over my head.
How can you be so sure?
I'm sure. Listen, those people were ruthless. Not that they were ruthless because they were naturally ruthless. They were ruthless because people who have a certain mind bend will do anything to push their own agenda.
Several nights later, Julius was arrested in front of the kids, taken off in handcuffs. The next day, Ethel posed for newspaper photographers in a sleeveless floral print house dress that exposed a slipping bra strap, trying to look normal, cutting up chicken at the kitchen sink.
We asked them for a search warrant, but they never showed one. They searched everything, even went through those copies of Parents Magazine, page by page. You know, we're just an ordinary Jewish family.
Enter Roy Cohn.
Rosenberg sounds like a tough individual. Knows his way around. Keep talking to him, but I don't have a great deal of hope. We need to motivate him.
Ethel wore a powder blue dress with white polka dots and white gloves to the grand jury.
Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I refuse to answer on the grounds it might tend to incriminate me.
You'll have to explain to me how that might incriminate you. Can you? Mrs. Rosenberg, I'm asking you a question.
I refuse to answer it on the grounds it might tend to incriminate me.
Incriminate you?
Well, the Smith Act?
Well, that's not going to incriminate you, unless you advocate the overthrow of the government by force. Do you?
Ethel was arrested before she reached the bottom of the courthouse steps.
Cross-fade. Ethel's on the phone with her son.
Michael, darling, they're going to keep me here for a little while, so I can't come home yet. You listen to Bubby and do what she tells you. Yes, honey, I'm sorry. It is like what happened to Daddy.
A child screams on the other end of the phone.
Then David met with his lawyer and Roy Cohn.
I don't understand why you've arrested my sister, and I won't testify if you arrest my wife. If you arrest her, I will commit suicide. I don't care what you think you can keep me from doing it, I'll do it.
Okay.
Don't test me, I will show you I can do it.
I said, okay, David's lawyer. See, wasn't that easy? And they say he's hard to deal with. Do you have any idea how much time my client here will serve? Roy Cohn. I don't know, 5 years maybe? David's lawyer. How about 2 years?
How about a suspended sentence?
Cohn smiles his sharp smile. He doesn't think so.
What about Julius? What do you see him doing?
10 years? Maybe 15?
That's a lot.
I was in the women's house of detention. My mother came, bless her heart.
I can't handle you kids anymore. Robbie just sits staring out a window like a dog or something to see if you're coming home, and he cries if I look at him crosswise. And that Michael's a spoiled, smart-mouthed brat.
I'm sorry, but this is hard on them.
Oh, and it's not hard on me? I don't have my hands full taking care of a whole apartment building? Listen, I brought up my own kids already. I deserve some peace and quiet in my old age.
There's nobody else to take care of them, Mama. Have a little patience, please. It's not their fault.
Oh, that's right, that's right. It's not theirs, it's not Doofy's, it's nobody's fault. But yours and Julius, and you gotta cooperate with the FBI. For your kids' sake.
Ma, I have no information to give.
Oh, please.
Would you believe David over me?
Don't you at least care about your kids? You think the party's gonna take care of them? I'm gonna give them to the authorities.
Tessie treated her son quite differently.
I know. But it would have been better if you hadn't done that.
She didn't say, how'd you ever get involved in it?
Oh, never. She knew that it was Ethel and Julius. You see, when you repeat errors, you repeat them again and again. I have repeated the same error again and again, except that now it's mostly about money I get screwed up. I trust people, you know, like you.
You don't trust me?
No, I do. That's my problem. I'm a born mark.
The courtroom was dimly lit. High chandeliers, shadowy faces. David never looked at Ethel and Julius. The Rosenberg's elderly lawyer was Manny Block.
You bear any affection for your sister Ethel?
I do.
You realize, do you not, that she's being tried here on a charge of conspiracy to commit espionage?
I do.
You realize the grave implication of that charge?
I do.
You realize the possible death penalty in the event that Ethel is convicted by this jury, do you not?
I do.
You bear affection for her?
I do.
At this moment?
At this moment.
Yesterday?
And as far back as I ever met her and knew her.
Cross David. Roy Cohn is alone with David.
We're going to have to suspend the Bill of Rights.
What are you, nuts?
Yeah, if the bomb comes down, what's the good of the Bill of Rights? We have to declare martial law and round up all the pinkos and put them in concentration camps. And we better do it now, because there won't be concentration camps or anything else if the bomb falls.
And you see an immediate threat.
Sure do. Don't you think so?
Nah, I don't think there's much threat at all.
Really?
Nah, it's never gonna happen. An atomic bomb dropped on the United States in our lifetime? And Jesus, if you eliminate the Bill of Rights, what are you fighting for? You'd be like them. He was a prick from the word go. He was born a fascist, died a fascist. Jewish or not, what did the FBI guys said to him? Roy Cohn is the coldest guy in the world, not a bit of human kindness. And that is from an FBI guy.
Cross David. Roy Cohn is alone with truth.
He's not being forthcoming about his sister's involvement. And time is running out.
Well, Ethel was part of it. She sat there and listened to everything, that's for sure.
Yes, but isn't there something else you remember? Something specific?
Not really.
See, conspiracy isn't enough. We can't break Julius and expose the rest of his spying without threatening Ethel with the chair. And we can't justify the death penalty for Ethel just because she sat there and agreed with her husband. Didn't she do something? Didn't she help him? I don't want to threaten or anything, but we have an agreement, do we not? That you and your husband are completely forthcoming.
Yes, and we are.
I mean, that's the basis for our not proceeding against you and for not asking the death penalty for your husband. So, darling, rack your brain. Surely you remember something else.
Well, Ethel did do the typing. At one point, I remember that.
Cross David. Roy Cohn alone with David.
Your wife says Ethel did the typing.
She does?
Yeah. You gave them a package of notes, but your handwriting was so bad. So Ethel typed them to give to the Russians.
She did. Ruth remembers that?
Listen. I know you're protecting your sister. But unless you tell us what you know about her activities, we can't guarantee that your wife will be safe from prosecution.
But we have a deal.
Not if you renege by holding back about Ethel.
Well, if my wife remembers that she typed, I guess she did. She has a wonderful memory.
Cross David. Now we're back in court.
Your sister typed your handwritten notes.
That is my memory, yes.
And what happened to your handwritten notes after she typed them?
We burnt them in a frying pan and flushed the ashes down the drain.
And were Julius and Ethel Rosenberg happy with the information you provided?
They were elated.
They were elated. Did they ever specifically talk about socialism as it existed in the Soviet Union and capitalism as it existed here?
They did.
Tell us whether or not on any occasion they told you they preferred one system over another.
They preferred socialism to capitalism.
Which type of socialism?
Russian socialism.
up one of the two pieces.
This is the side I have.
Where did you last see this other side on that night?
In Julius's hand.
Crossfade. Manny Block cross-examines him.
You know at the time, did you not, that you were engaging in a commission of a very serious crime?
I did.
And there was a possible penalty of death for espionage?
Yes,
You knew that?
I did.
And you said to your wife, yes, I will do it. You knew that there was a death penalty, is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, you're smiling.
Not very.
You knew that you were violating the oath you took at the time of your induction. Did it enter your mind?
A violation of that oath did not enter my mind.
You believe that you were doing an honorable or dishonorable thing?
I didn't think of it that way.
How did you think of it?
I thought of it from what I had on the basis of the philosophy I believed in. I felt it was the right thing to do at the time.
Crossfade. David's lawyer grabs him before he is taken away.
You've got to stop smiling. It looks like you don't take the whole thing seriously.
I take it very seriously.
Well, that's why you must stop smiling.
It's not really conscious.
Be conscious.
What was that with the smile?
Nervous smile, maybe. Not because I felt very smiley, you know. Just that sometimes you don't know what your face is doing, and nobody does. Like when you're doing that. You think it's pleasant to get up there and testify against your brother-in-law and sister? It is not pleasant.
What is it?
It is unpleasant. It is horrible.
Crossfade. Courtroom again. Ethel is on the stand.
I'm interested in your relationship with your baby brother. Did you love him?
Yes, I loved him very much.
Did he look up to you?
Yes,
And your husband, before the arguments that were discussed here in court?
he liked us both. He liked my husband.
Sort of hero worship?
You know, I don't remember ever kissing. Yeah, never. I can't remember. I can't remember my mother kissing me, or my father. Yeah, it's not that kind of family.
But do you think Ethel loved you?
I think she did.
If she had been caught first, do you think she would have named you?
Well, given the fact that she didn't admit to anything, I doubt if she would have.
But if she could have saved her own skin somehow by naming you, would she?
I doubt it very much.
Crossfade. Back in court. Roy Cohn is working on Ethel.
You told the grand jury you refused to answer because it would incriminate you. I don't understand how it would incriminate you if you are innocent.
It wouldn't necessarily incriminate me, but it might. As long as there was any chance for me to be incriminated, I had the right to use that privilege.
You didn't know how much the FBI knew about you, so you weren't taking any chances, is that it?
I object to the form of that question.
It was overruled by Judge Clark.
Now, Mrs. Greenglass.
Mrs. Rosenberg.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Rosenberg, you are the defendant here.
Crossfade. Manny Block summarizes for the defense.
Before you believe anybody who is willing to swear away the life of somebody, I think justice dictates that you consider the type of person testified. Now let us take David Greenglass. Before I summed up, I went to the dictionary to find a word that would describe David Greenglass. I couldn't find it. Because I don't think there is a word in the English vocabulary or in the dictionary of any civilization which can describe a character like David Greenglass. One thing I think you do know, that any man who will testify against his own flesh and blood, his own sister, is repulsive, revolting, violates every code that any civilization has ever lived by. The lowest of the lowest animals that I have ever seen. Remember how he smirked on the stand? Is this a person to give credence?
Crossfade. Roy Cohn summarizes for the prosecution.
This description of the atomic bomb, Soviet Union was typed up by the defendant Ethel Rosenberg. She sat at that typewriter and struck the keys blow by blow against her own country in the interest of the Soviets.
He is, was, and will be a prick. And if there is a hell, he should be rotting. And that Judge Kaufman was every bit as bad.
Why?
Because he was a Jew. They all were. They put Jewish prosecutors and a Jewish judge in there. Can you imagine the nerve of this guy? He went to temple and he prayed about what the sentence should be and decided. And what about thou shalt not kill, right? What about that? Then he comes out of the temple and he goes to a payphone and calls the Justice Department. He calls the Justice Department where he violates every one of the judicial laws. You can't have private conversations with either side.
Cross day. Judge Kaufman is on a payphone.
I've been at the synagogue for hours, Roy, praying for guidance.
Roy Cohn is on the other end.
Good for you. Anyway, here's my thinking. It's clear she's the stronger of the two. She's the lever. Do the right thing, and he'll talk.
This is the man they put in charge, right? It was a setup made for one purpose only, to get these people guilty, and so Jews wouldn't complain. If that is not blatant anti-Semitism, think if it was a black.
It does seem odd in New York, with the biggest Jewish population of any city in the world, to have one Jew on the jury.
Yeah, how'd that happen?
You think it would have helped?
Of course.
It is 12 noon. Church bells begin to roll and peal as the Rosenbergs rise for sentencing. Julius sways slowly on the balls of his feet. Ethel grips the chair in front of her.
I consider your crime worse than murder. Putting a bomb into the hands of the Russians caused, in my opinion, the communist aggression in Korea. The resultant casualties exceeding 50,000. Who knows, but millions more of innocent people may pay the price of your treason. You are hereby sentenced to the punishment of death.
Nobody ever mentioned the death penalty. For God's sake, we weren't at war with Russia. They were our friends. It didn't even occur to me that anybody was dying.
Crossfade.
I was alone in the holding cell when I heard Ethel singing to me from her cell down the way.
Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in the town. Sometimes I take a great notion to jump in the river and drown. Good night, Irene. Good night.
A hardened criminal told me. There's some wifey out there.
Crossfade. David rises for sentencing. He isn't smiling.
Have you anything you want to say? The fact that I'm about to show you some consideration does not mean I condone your acts, minimize them in any respect. They were loathsome. They were contemptible. I must, however, recognize the help given by you in apprehending and bringing to justice the arch criminals in this nefarious scheme. I shall therefore follow the recommendation of the government and sentence you to 15 years in prison.
Crossfade. In the holding cell later, David comforts Ruth as best he can with handcuffs.
We'll be all right. I'll come out of this. We'll live through it. Don't worry.
There were riots in Paris. In fact, crowds in many countries protested the death sentence of the Rosenbergs.
Crossfade. Julius is writing a letter.
Dear Michael and Robbie, if you think we're licked, you don't know your mommy and daddy. Do the best you can to wait. I know it's hard. And keep us informed as to how you're doing in school and how you spend your time. And don't worry, we will be together with you again when all this is over. All my love. Daddy.
Crossfade. Ethel reads a letter from Julius.
Hello, pretty. Flower of my life. Nightingale of my heart. Long time no see. I believe we're entering a new lap in our long fight to win our freedom. Has an inherent goodness and fairness in the American people that when
But their appeal was denied.
my dearest, sweetest children, all the miles in the world can't really separate us from one another. There have been so many enjoyments you have shared with me without your knowledge. For days I have been checking up on a weed that gradually began to take on the characteristics of, was it possible, a dandelion. When lo and behold,
Tessie comes to see her daughter in prison.
You're killing David. And you're killing me. Give them some names, and then
you want me to commit perjury?
you wouldn't be here.
Do you love me, Mama?
What's that supposed to mean? That I don't?
You always loved David more.
Baloney. I love my kids equal because I'm a mother, but my God, poor Doobie, people are threatening to kill him.
So go talk to him. I'll pay your way to Lewisburg prison. Tell him whatever fear of reprisal is motivating him. My life is in danger, not his. Why can't he be man enough to own up to his own lie and help save my life instead of letting me die to save his face?
You have to divorce Julius and cooperate with the government.
I'm not going to do that.
You're not thinking of your children.
Don't mention the children. There are children born every day of the week.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Nothing you'd understand, Mama.
I'm ashamed you're my daughter.
Go away, Mama. And don't ever visit me again.
Fine. Fine with me. Oh, guess what your son Michael said to me? I hope she dies because of the harm she's causing me.
You witch!
Cross date, David writes a letter.
Dear President Eisenhower, if my sister and her husband die, I shall live the rest of my life with a very dark shadow on my conscience. I never thought this would be the outcome. If you ever hurt someone you have loved, even inadvertently, then you know how I feel. May God, in his mercy, change that awful sentence.
President Eisenhower responded by immeasurably increasing the chances of atomic war. The Rosenbergs may have condemned to death millions of innocent people all over the world. In jail, David became friendly with Harry Gold, who worked as a go-between with the Soviets.
I just can't believe they're going to confess. They're not going to confess. It's so stupid. It's fucking stubborn.
What you believe in?
But what a position it puts me in. Makes me look like...
I blame the government. It'd be different if they were going to let them go home to their kids. But to ask them to disgrace themselves for the pleasure of doing 30 years?
Disgrace? You feel I've disgraced myself? What about you? What'd you tell on me for?
Well, I wouldn't have if I'd known you like I do now.
Yeah, you would. You think I don't love my sister? Why do they keep telling their kids they are innocent?
Because in their mind they are, like we are. Technically guilty, but morally innocent. You think the kids are going to understand that?
In prison, Ethel became friendly with one of the matrons.
The way I see it, you're here because of your husband and your brother. You should tell them what they want to know. Were you and your brother close as kids?
He was my baby brother.
And this is how he repays you.
Sure, he never thought it would come to this.
I think most people, if you said to them, talk or you die, they would talk. But if you say, you're going to die unless you take a hammer and beat a bunch of your friends to death, a lot of people, the best ones really, would hesitate. Especially if they're going to be in prison anyway. Why didn't the government sweeten the deal? It gave you only one deal. You talk, you don't die.
Manny Block brought our precious boys to see us, and our family lived again for a couple hours. Robbie said I looked small. I explained it was because he was bigger. He circled my neck with his little arms. And Julie was a big pussycat chasing the little mouse Robbie, and we had fun. Michael was troubled, disturbed, the burden's on him obvious. He told the guard, "You better watch me when I grow up. I don't want my mother and father to die, because if they do, I'll kill Uncle Dave." chanting in a strange, awful way. One more day to live. One more day to live. I told him, it's painless. Like a highly magnified electric shock that anybody might sustain.
I told them not to worry, that I thought they'd change their minds at the last minute, that we'd just squeak through.
Crossfade, the electric chair appears on stage.
Miraculously, a stay was granted. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas stayed the Rosenberg execution.
Thank God.
Whoops of joy, shouts. Manny Blanc is running around in circles like a wind-up toy, screaming ecstatically when his phone rings. He answers, listens a moment, his face falls.
You're kidding!
Crossfade, light changes.
The Supreme Court was called back into extraordinary session to vacate Justice Douglas's stay. The Rosenberg execution was reset for 11 p.m. tonight in Sing Sing's electric chair. It was an unbearably muggy summer day. The rabbi for Sing Sing was home with his family when the prison warden called him.
They pushed it up because of the Jewish Sabbath. Now they want to do it again.
I'm gonna call the judge.
Well, it don't take long. I need to let the press know.
So I called the judge, and he said,
Yes, I have these telegrams from Jews not to do it on the Sabbath, so we're not. Believe me, I'm sure you're concerned. Don't worry. I'll send a squad car to get you home in time.
that's not my concern. Jewish law is you prolong life. Even 1 minute, you set the Sabbath aside. What's the harm of Saturday night?
No. The President wants them to be executed. That's my decision.
Well, I don't agree.
Rabbi, you do your job, I'll do mine.
Crossfade.
I gathered the belongings in my cell. They filled 3 cartons, 1935 calendar, my insect collection of moths and cockroaches that invaded my cell, and a facsimile of the Declaration of Independence that I had signed with the other signers in one corner. Julius Rosenberg.
The rabbi brings Ethel in to see Julius. Separated by wire, the couple stares at one another.
I was thinking, you might want to make wills.
Not that much, but okay.
Meanwhile, at the White House, exhausted and sick, their lawyer, Manny Block, had to fight his way through the surging crowd of demonstrators.
But I must see President Eisenhower this afternoon. I'm not leaving here until I see him.
Dearest sweethearts, my most precious children, only this morning it looked like we might be together again after all. Now that this cannot be, I want so much for you to know all that I have come to know, that life is worth the living, that freedom and all the things that go to make life satisfying and worthwhile must sometimes be purchased very dearly. We wish we might have had the tremendous joy of living our lives out with you. We press you close. Lovingly, Daddy and Mommy.
In spite of appeals by Pope Pius and other European leaders, President Eisenhower has again denied clemency for the Rosenbergs. The rabbi at Sing Sing has been called to the phone. He's out of breath and sweating from the heat and humidity.
Yes, this is Rabbi Kozlov.
Attorney General Brownell, Rabbi, I'm calling from Washington. I want you to know that if they give even one name, the execution will be saved. You don't.
We have no names to give. We're innocent.
They sat together, close but unable to touch, while the activity around them proceeded ineluctably. They shaved Julius's leg, shaved a patch on Ethel's head.
The warden at Lewisburg was afraid of what I'd do, so they put something in my food. I fell asleep.
The Rosenbergs are moved to the final holding cells near the electric chair. The sun is getting very low in the sky. There's a crowd of protesters outside Sing Sing, for and against. Hang the commie bastards. They stink too bad to fry. And save the Rosenbergs. The crowd at Union Square in New York is huge, 100,000, and almost 100% against the execution. People were crying as they watched the sun sink behind the buildings. Ethel was sitting in her holding cell. Next door in his, Julius was crying. Not loud, but he can't seem to stop. She can't bear to hear it. The lawyers made a last-minute appeal to Judge Kaufman to delay the execution until all arguments are completed.
Petition denied.
The warden took Rabbi Kozlow aside.
You have any thoughts on who should go first?
He's the shakier.
The sun was on the horizon. The rabbi tells Julius,
Unless you have some objection, we'll take you first.
Julius follows the rabbi to the electric chair.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
Numb with terror, breathing rapidly, no tears left, Julius's knees give way and he has to be helped into the chair. They remove his eyeglasses, fold them gently and put them aside. They strap an electrode to his leg, affix another to his head like a skull cap. The black leather mask is fixed over his eyes. They step back. Someone throws the switch. Crossfade. Lights out on Julius, up on Ethel. Rabbi returns to her.
Your husband is dead. For your children's sake, do you have anything to say to me? A name to stay the execution?
No. I have no names to give. I'm innocent.
Oh my God, in thee have I trusted. Let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me.
Ethel walks towards the chair with the matron.
Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. Consider how many are mine enemies, and the cruel hatred wherewith they hate me.
Ethel is strikingly composed.
For I have heard the whispering of many, terror on every side. While they took counsel together against me, they devised to take away my life. Let the wicked be ashamed. Let them be put to silence in their netherworld. Let lying lips be dumb, which speak arrogantly against the righteous with pride and contempt.
Just as she is about to sit, Ethel extends her right hand to the matron, who grasps it. Ethel gently kisses her on the cheek.
Oh, Mrs. Evans, you're such a wonderful woman.
Matron's eyes moisten as she dashes from the room. Ethel then mounts the chair. As the electrodes are attached to her body, she stares directly into the audience. The switch is flipped. 3 2,000-volt jolts. They listen to her heart. It's still beating. They signal. Across the stage, David stirs in his sleep. 2 more massive jolts. A ghastly plume of smoke rises from her head. David, her brother, still sleeps.
David woke before dawn.
I didn't cry, but it was the saddest day of my life.
There were massive protests all over the world. Rioting crowds in Paris chanted, "Ike assassin." Time passed, but the conviction grew that they were framed. Scientists declared that what they had given the Soviets was without value. It came out that even J. Edgar Hoover had said Ethel shouldn't be executed. Picasso drew them, flattering portraits, as did many other artists. A monument to them was unveiled in Havana. And eventually David was released from Lewisburg. He was asked by reporters what he was going to do after 10 years in prison.
All I want is to be forgotten.
Was it the worst thing you ever did in your life?
Nah. There were worse, probably.
Like what?
Making an atomic bomb. Killing 100,000 people. We didn't know if it was going to work, but we were really hoping it would. So I was part of a scheme to kill hundreds of thousands of people. And that's the worst thing I ever did. Not telling about it to the Russians.
Worse than lying on the witness stand about your sister typing? They never would have executed her without that.
I didn't know it become so important. I frankly think my wife did the typing, but I don't remember.
And you didn't remember it at the time of the trial?
I didn't remember it then either. I can only assume my wife didn't make it up. She has a terrific memory. When she says something happened, it happened. I wouldn't say that much about her now. She's always blaming me for things that I don't think I did, but in those years, her memory was sharp. I told them the story, and I left Ethel out of it, right? But my wife put her in it, so what am I going to do? To call my wife a liar? My wife is my wife. I mean, I don't sleep with my sister.
Roy Cohen became chief counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy, then embarked on an illustrious career as defense lawyer and power broker. He was disbarred in 1986 and died 6 weeks later. The Rosenberg's judge, Irving R. Kaufman, became chief judge of the Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan. Lived a long life, died at 81. At his funeral, a heckler screamed, "He murdered the Rosenbergs. Let them rot in hell." David, Ruth, their children and grandchildren live under pseudonyms. Outside their house, on the metal rack where you'd expect their name to hang, there's nothing. What would you say you were most proud of in your life?
I guess my wife and children. I mean, that's the thing I'm most proud of. But for my personal events, the fact that I can take a lot of aggravation and come up smiling. Also that I can solve problems. I'm a damn good engineer.
Okay. What do you think your shortcomings have been?
Gullible. I'm gullible. I am gullible. That is my shortcoming. I am willing to take a man at face value. Other people's dreams, I don't knock down easily.
Do you dream at all?
Yeah, mostly I dream about things, machines, dreams. I don't have all overall concepts of what the world should be like. I'd like there to be some sort of justice in the world. I mean, economic, democratic. I expect that to happen eventually, at some point.
How do you think history will remember you?
As the guy that sent his sister to the chair.
But how do you want history to remember you?
I don't care. I won't be around when you write that history.
Yeah. But your family won't.
They know me. How much of my family, after all? 1 or 2 generations. People won't even know I was alive.
If you met them now, if Julius and Ethel walked in that door, I know this is silly, but what would you say to them?
I wouldn't say, "I'm sorry, I testified," I'll tell you that.
What do you think they would say to you?
They would say, "You're a traitor." They heap all kinds of abuse on me.
If they had lived, do you think they would have changed their minds about communism? With the demise of the Soviet Union and everything?
I have no idea. I would think intelligent people would have seen the error of their ways, but a lot of intelligent people don't see the error of their ways. I know people that change their mind every 10 minutes, and I know people who hold on to something to the end of time.
What about you? If you had to do anything different in all of this again, what would you do?
I think that I would not have done it.
Why?
Well, for one thing, it's really a very disruptive thing in your life. It puts you off track. Well, my life is good. My life is good. Really? Sure. I have a wonderful life now. A great family. Both kids, doctors. Every year, I eat Thanksgiving dinner with them. I feel really thankful. Grandkids, everything. And I get in bed with my wife.
Ruth comes up and embraces him from behind.
I spoon my body against him and put my arm around him. He still hears his sister's voice. Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in a town.
hopes his obituary will read,
a good father, a good husband, a good son, a good brother, born in a time which tore people's souls.
The end.
So again, thank you so much for staying. And this is the director, Ian Strasvogel. Who also helped to create the abridged version. And again, I think a real round of applause for the actors. This was quite a spectacular. So my first question goes to Sam. One of the lines in the play from David, it says, "I wanted to be forgotten." How come you wrote the novel?
Well, I wrote the book because I got familiar with the case when I was 6 years old growing up in Brooklyn, and my father took my sister and myself to the corner of our block to see the funeral procession go by. And I'm not sure what he thought about it historically, but he said, this is history, this is something that you should see. And many years later, shortly after I got to the New York Times, a new book came out about the case. And Arthur Gelb, who was then my editor, said, well, we keep writing book reviews saying there is news in this book. Why don't you write a news story? It seemed like a novel concept, actually, in a newspaper, but I went ahead trying to do it. And I called a number of people who had covered the case for us, and they said, what you really want to do is find David Greenglass and get him to talk. So for 10 or so years, I found him, I nagged him, and I finally, after many years, got a response saying that he was willing to talk, and I had no idea what he would say. It could have been all self-validating, it could have been all self-justification, but in fact, he dug himself in deeper and deeper, and what he told me was that he lied about the single most damning evidence against his sister. Did Ethel, in fact, do the typing that day? We will never know. But the fact is that if David Greenglass had testified honestly, which is, I don't remember, she would not have been convicted, and she certainly would not have been executed.
Actually, Arthur Gelb is with us, and he gave you the assignment. With us also tonight is Louise Hirschfeld-Kuhlmann, who brought the play to our attention, so we would like to thank Louise too.
Yes.
And,
thank you, Louise, for everything you've done for us tonight.
Yeah. So we had Arthur Gelb who said, get the story, you wrote it. Then you wrote the novel. Now we have the playwrights. How come you said this is a story to write, and when did you decide what time?
I heard Sam being interviewed on NPR, and I don't know, it made it somehow immediate contact with the things that interested me. And I bought the book right away from Amazon and read it on the airplane on the way to California, and by the time I was there, I wanted to make a movie out of it. It proved to be a very hard movie to make, to get financed, so I thought, well, wouldn't this make a wonderful play? Because it really focuses on this fascinating character. I mean, it is, to me, the interest in this is this peculiar guy, this strange lack of self-awareness, and also, I mean, he's like a booby, but he's also human. I mean, he's the whole the dynamic of the family, and of course the scariness of that time. I felt reading Sam's book, I thought, I'm committing something illicit. I thought, will they come and get me? I mean, it's a crazy thought, but I mean, that I did feel, ooh. And so I recognized that as something that meant it was something I should work on, and involved my wife, who we've written many times together, and I needed her to help with the dialogue. And
so you're normally also a screenwriter and a director,
yeah.
but how did you divide up the role, Dorothy? How did you?
Of working together?
Yeah, for this play.
We worked, well, because the book was so rich, so complete in every way that it was very easy to do. But our method of working is that we kind of work separately, and then we switch papers and go back and forth like this.
So you write the same scenes, and then you just compare?
No, we'll write different things and switch it around and make corrections.
We pass it back and forth and revise each other's material.
Wonderful. That's
Thank you.
A real
Right.
collaboration.
That's how it goes. See? Oops.
Yeah. And with us is Ben Peterson, who actually, he's just said before, esteemed physicist, and who just before the evening started said, you undercut Julius by a year. You were at City College, actually also studying physics.
Actually, we underlapped.
You underlapped, yes.
Yes. Just by he graduated the year I came in 1939.
And you actually were in...
That is Rosenberg.
But you did overlap with David Greenglass at Los Alamos.
Yeah, but David Greenglass I knew at Los Alamos.
Tell us about that time.
Well, I have to paint a bit of a picture of what was going on there. There were a group of soldiers, for one reason or another, that got sent to Los Alamos to work on the atomic bomb. Most of them were scientific, had scientific backgrounds. Many of them had degrees. I didn't have yet a degree. I was just a junior at City College. A long story, but I ended up at Los Alamos in 1944. And we were put into we were given jobs. I'll tell you about the job a little later. But we lived in a barracks of 50 men. There were 25 double bunks. I had a bunk with a good friend of mine, William Spindell, who also appears in Sim's book. Right next to us appeared a few months later David Greenglass and a good friend of his, Hoy Adler, I think his name was. So we were right next to each other, all four of us, and we quickly discovered that we had very common backgrounds. I had originally I grew up originally in the Lower East Side, but moved out of there to the Bronx. We had fathers who both came from Minsk in Russia. We both had, obviously, how would you say it, radical backgrounds, as many other people at that time had. And Greenglass and I at first got along okay, but it had happened that we had early on diverged very, very dramatically. He started out with a Jewish culture and as a religious Jew. I started out as an atheist. I started out as a communist background. He started out as a religious background. We switched sometime during our young ages. He became a communist, and I, by that time, had discarded the whole idea of communism. I got much more interested in physics, and by that time, I was far from a fellow traveler or anything of that sort. And we got into violent political arguments. Spindell and I, on the one hand, who had left the movement, and Greenglass and his friend on the other hand, the arguments got so violent that we ultimately asked for a transfer to a new barracks that was just being built. We got out of there, and that was when our friendship with Greenglass ended.
Yeah, Ben, when you listen to the play, I'm sure you also know the book. How does this all feel to you?
I would say, I was thinking, while I was listening to the play, I was thinking of the opera Dr. Atomic that I had also participated in some form earlier. A wonderful opera by Peter Adams, John Adams.
Yeah. Peter Go.
Not Peter Adams. The opera, I thought, painted Oppenheimer inaccurately. But I realized eventually that I was watching a work of art that was a beautiful work of art that came to the heart of the subject, that did not stick to the facts. Oppenheimer was not, as painted, reluctant to build the atomic bomb. He was eager to build the atomic bomb. But that was besides the point. It was a wonderful opera, a work of art, and got to the truth of the strength of the movement of the bomb, how important it was, and the feelings of the people that were working on it. I felt the same way as the play. I didn't think necessarily, I was not sympathetic to the Rosenbergs. I knew that Julius was guilty. The Venona records had already come out and clearly showed that he was guilty. David Greenglass, I knew was a loudmouth, no goodnik, and I didn't have any personal sympathy for them, but the play moved me terribly. Even though while I was watching while I knew the facts on the one hand, I was watching a work of art on the other hand, and I thought that art won over facts.
If I could just say, when I looked at the play, I was probably the only author to come to this without a predisposition. And what I discovered is that Julius was guilty of the legal charge, conspiracy to commit espionage. There's no question about that. Did he steal the secret to the atomic bomb? There probably wasn't a secret, and if there was, the Russians already knew it. But what you found out in this case is that you can frame a guilty man. And to me, the most stunning moment in all my research in doing the book was when I interviewed Bill Rogers, who was the Deputy Attorney General to Herb Brownell, who you heard in the play. And I said, well, I guess, Mr. Rogers, this went just the way you wanted it to. You indicted them, you convicted them, you executed them. And he said, no, that's not what we wanted at all. We wanted Ethel to talk and use her as leverage to get Julius to talk and reveal all the things that we couldn't say because we had gotten them by illicitly and secretly breaking the Russian code. And I said to him, well, what went wrong? And he said, Ethel Rosenberg called our bluff. And to me, that was the most cynical, riveting statement that a public official could ever make. In effect, he knew that the government was bluffing and went ahead and executed her anyway.
Brian Schwartz on the left side, who is also a professor of physics, and he's at the Graduate Center of CUNY with the Science and the Art series. Maybe you have some memories about that time. What was the atmosphere?
Well, let me talk a little bit. My claim to fame is in reading the play. I saw Ben Peterson's name in the play, and I immediately called him and said, "Are you willing to speak?" Because I'm a physicist. I thought I would have to represent all the physics, but I had a real eyewitness, so that's was better than me talking about it. I think the other thing is, I knew there would be a big crowd when we were talking about would there be a lot of people, and it's somehow the atom bomb is really the focus of a lot of things that get people really interested. When it was the turn of the century, there were a lot of lists of what are the most important plays, the most important novels, the most important authors, things like that. And they asked journalists, what was the most important journalistic event of the 20th century? And without a doubt, the leading event was the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima. So the bomb is already a thing of interest. We recently had the play Copenhagen, which dealt with why the Germans, under Heisenberg, a German physicist, didn't build the bomb. You heard about the opera Dr. Atomic, which was very popular as well. In fact, on February 15th, write it down on your calendar, in this very room, we're having a play called Farm Hall. Right after the war, we interned a bunch of German scientists, put them in a mansion in England, and then we bugged it to hear the Germans talking about what was going on. And what they were talking about is how satisfied they were with the fact that how much they knew about nuclear physics and the fact that the Allies knew nothing. And they were very sure they were ahead. And it was a big shock to them when the bomb exploded. I was 12 years old when the Rosenberg trial started. I had just gotten over the propaganda of hating the Japanese, which as a kid I was trained to hate. No one told me about the Germans. Somehow in America the Germans were left out. And then by 1950 I was beginning to hear that the Russians had the Bear bomber, which was ahead of our planes at the time, and I was very nervous about the Russians. So I was a real product of American propaganda at the time. And so the Rosenberg trial was done at a time like that, where suddenly our friends, the Russians, were now our enemies, and the real start of the Cold War. So I'm a product of that period, and it's very hard to, with young people, it's very hard to put themselves back in the time. I know one of the biggest issues between young and old is should we or should we not have dropped the bomb on Japan? And that's always an issue, and I think will always be an issue, and there is no answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Frank, when I began researching the book, I knew it was a book about the atomic bomb, about the discovery of it, about what J. Edgar Hoover would call the trial of the century. What I learned was that it was also about family dysfunction and loyalty and betrayal. And then after 9/11, I realized how much it resonated in everyday life. We're still trying to reconcile national security and civil liberties. We still debate blind loyalty. We still talk about the whole notion of scapegoating a particular group, ethnically, religiously, or otherwise. And for the first time in 50 years, we felt vulnerable to an outside attack, this time by suicide bombers rather than suicide spies.
That's true. It is, quite interesting that this play comes up. We do the reading now, and also to see the emotions on both sides, and then compared to the facts with so much going on. But Jan, tell us, as a director, is this a contemporary play?
I think it's a human play. I think it is, in a certain sense, exclusively about the brother. The family dysfunction that Sam talked about and John talked about is refracted through this, to me, astounding person who is so opaque, so, in a sense, unaware of himself, and yet so preyed upon by his not fully admitted sense of guilt, and the trap that he, through his own foolishness and his own political beliefs, built for himself. It's really working on it with this wonderful cast, which I feel so fortunate to have been able to have, was so easy, so direct, because they immediately understood, as actors must, the human reality that confronted everyone, including, and very importantly, including Sam's response to this man as he revealed himself. This astonishing self-revelation in spite of himself that you witnessed and facilitated, I must add, very cunningly.
The actors got my just right.
So here the reporter saw himself as a figure in a play. But and it is so fascinating, this incredibly intimate family relation, and then the world stage.
Yes.
All within, a square.
Could I? I'd like to ask Sam and the authors a question about the dialogue. I assume that part of the dialogue was direct quotations from the trial, so that was verbatim, and a lot of the dialogue was directly out of Sam's book because I recognized some of it. How much of it is accurate, or was any of it accurate, or was it all simply a
great deal of it is accurate. We not only had the book to work from, but we had transcripts of Sam's interviews. You could make 5 wonderful plays out of those. I mean, there's
all of the statements attributed to David were accurate because they came out of hours and hours and hours of recorded interviews. Some of the statements between Julius and Ethel came out of transcripts in which the FBI was overhearing their conversations. Obviously, things came out of the trial itself, and a lot of came out of FBI briefings that I got hold of through the Freedom of Information Act. So this is the dialogue as taken down by the FBI, but at least it's attributable to a primary source.
So we would say this is almost like a case of documentary theater, where
very much so.
Where you put things.
Maybe there's about 2% invented, perhaps the scenes between Tessie and Ethel. Maybe I forget actually.
How did you track David Greenglass down?
Not easily. I mean, nowadays, frankly, with the internet, it would probably be a lot easier. In that time, and this began in the mid-1980s, it was very difficult. It was a combination of painstaking shoe leather work, finding various records, getting them to match, and then once I finally found him, trying to persuade him to talk. This goes back so far that I even sent him telegrams pleading with him to talk. So that really dates this. And then showing up in his driveway. And finally, one point, I got a letter from a lawyer saying, the gentleman you've been trying to reach would like to speak with you. And then I knew he was hooked. And what was so fascinating was the lawyer, who was his lawyer in business matters, had never been told who he was. So the week before the lawyer wrote the letter to me, David went to the lawyer and said, I have to tell you something. You don't really know who I am. And the lawyer looked at him and said, well, who are you, Hitler, Stalin? Of course, the punchline would be no worse. And then he said, no, I'm David Greenglass. My sister was Ethel Rosenberg. And the lawyer was absolutely stunned. He could never have imagined this. Because as the play pointed out, in 1960, when David Greenglass got out of jail, he was asked what he wanted to do, and he said, all I want is to be forgotten. And he'll never be forgotten. As some of you may remember in Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors, Woody Allen is explaining to his sister how much he really loves his brother-in-law, who's played by whoever it is, his oleaginous brother-in-law, and he says, I love him like a brother. David Greenglass. I'm not sure how many people watching the film got it.
Oh, God.
But I mean, when someone becomes an immortal figure like that, and Rebecca West described David testifying against his sister, and she called it the evil twin of incest. Fascinating. I mean, this is a guy, and Ed Doctorow said in the book of Daniel, this is a guy, he made him a dentist, even worse than a machinist, but he said this is a guy whose treachery will live with him for the rest of his life. And arguably that has happened. David is still alive. He is still living under a pseudonym in the metropolitan area. He is a little older than Ben, as Ben pointed out.
Is he here tonight?
No, you.
I don't see him tonight.
It was such a trouble to
I'm
get
looking
in.
for him. I don't see him either.
But, yeah. Before we come to some questions, maybe is there anything else you would like to add or say or ask someone on the panel? Brian.
I mean, what's surprising is there was a physicist named Klaus Fuchs who really gave really good information, and he, for some reason, was allowed to leave the United States after they had caught him spying. He went back to England thinking, and in fact began working at Harwell for a while, and then ultimately got tried and sentenced to like 20-year sentence, serving only 10, and then disappeared, went to East Germany.
England did not have a death penalty. He admitted everything he had done. He gave a lot more valuable information than David Greenglass did. The Russians also got information from another scientist who was not prosecuted at all, Ted Hall.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of things to remember in this case that we sometimes lose sight of. You're not supposed to give classified information to a foreign power at all, regardless of whether you think it's worth anything or not. You're not supposed to give classified information to a foreign power, regardless of whether they're an ally, as the Soviet Union was at the time, or an enemy. Also, the Russians were even more paranoid than we were. So the information that David provided to them corroborated the information they were getting from other sources. And it then led them to believe that what Ted Hall was telling them, what Klaus Fuchs was telling them, was absolutely true, which is why the bomb that they exploded in 1949 was an exact replica of the one that was tested or developed at Los Alamos, because they thought the Americans could build a better bomb than the Russians could. Stalin thought that, and they copied the one that we did. And that was in part the result of David Greenglass. Another thing that occurred in this, just very quickly, is sometime, a couple of years ago, I was talking to Morty Sobel, who was another defendant in the case, and Mort is getting up there, he's in his mid-90s, I guess, and he said he had reached out to the person who testified against him at the trial. And Morty did a lot of hard time at Alcatraz and other places. He was not accused of atomic espionage, but industrial espionage. And I said, well, you know, are you at that point in your life where you're saying, let bygones be bygones? I said, the next thing you're going to tell me, Morty, is that you were a spy. And he said, well, I wouldn't use that word. And then he went on to confess to me that, in fact, after all these years of defending himself, after all these years of people, communist or not, defending him, yes, in fact, he was a spy. So talk about the ultimate betrayal.
Wow.
I did want to make one last comment. John Hancock and I were talking about this earlier. You do have to understand also, when you talk about what a terrible rat Mr. Greenglass is and was, it really was between, the way Roy Cohn and the government placed it, it was between his wife and his sister. And he said, I don't sleep with my sister.
And also, in fairness, very few people thought the death penalty was going to be a real thing when that part of the case was taking place. People did not expect it to be imposed, much less carried out.
Yeah, that shines really through in the play. So we have time for a couple of questions. I'm just going to call out numbers, and if you can, say to be repeated. So I said 1, what was here? 2, 3, and then 4 in the back with the black.
But go to the microphones. There were microphones.
Yeah, or you, it might be tough to get up if you say it and we repeat. Yeah, you can get.
Okay, to Sam Roberts, I don't think very many people who followed this case ever would have, and wrote about it, ever would have predicted that David Greenglass would ultimately talk to somebody and acknowledge what he did to you. So I know you say you pursued him for many years before it happened, but ultimately, what do you think it was that got him to agree to talk and agree to...
Yeah, you paid him.
When he wanted to talk, he wanted money for speaking with me. And I went to Nick Pileggi, an old friend of mine, and said, help. What do I do? And Nick had done a number of books with mobsters and other sort of nefarious, odious people. And he said, you really don't have a choice. If you want their story, if you want their time, you have to pay for it. You don't like it professionally, you don't like it financially, but that is the only way to get it. You run the risk, of course, of someone who is then going to tell you something that is self-validating, self-justifying. In David's case, first of all, it was just the opposite. The more he talked, the more he dug himself in deeper and deeper. And also he had zero control over the final manuscript. He never even read it until after the book came out. So I felt that I had the reasonable degree of independence. I was reluctant, as I say, for professional and, frankly, financial reasons for having to share anything with him. He did also not make any money after the advance. So however the book did, one way or the other, he didn't profit from that.
But still, money talks in this way, yeah. So here?
My question is, didn't the Russians get their information from Klaus Fuchs and not from David Greenglass?
The answer quickly is yes. They got most of their information from Klaus Fuchs.
Was a reputable scientist at Los Alamos.
He knew everything. He was much more intimately involved with the details of making the atom bomb. That information was confirmed by Ted Hall, who was another physicist. And as I said, David Greenglass played the role of corroborating what they said, which arguably was important to the Russians too.
Thank you. There was a question here. Maybe you say it and I'll repeat it. Maybe, yeah. Okay.
I guess there are two different issues when it comes to the awfulness of the tragedy of the Rosenbergs being killed. There's another order of difficulty with the development of the bomb and nuclear power, which is partly your job. The real question, which well, it's not the real question, you fleshed out very carefully the issue of, does one brother betray another brother when the other brother commits a crime? And maybe the crime is as important as murder, maybe as in the Woody Allen movie, or maybe the crime is minor, but it's a major issue, and I don't know for myself how to speak to this.
Well, when I wrote the book, the thing that I wanted to accomplish, and you could all decide whether I did or not, was let the reader put him or herself in the position of the people in this drama, and let them try to decide as objectively as one possibly could what they would have done under similar circumstances. It was not a black and white case. No one went to David Greenglass and said, testify against your sister, you'll save your wife, and your sister will be dead. It wasn't that easy. And in fact, as he pointed out, when he first went before the FBI, he did not implicate his sister at all. He implicated his wife. But then as time went on and it became apparent there was a deal in the works, and then Ruth said, oh, I think Ethel did the typing. And David said, well, I don't remember that, but if she said it, I'm not going to call her a liar. And then he gets on the witness stand and testifies that Ethel did the typing, and then Ruth comes on and corroborates his testimony. And then the prosecutor says, Ethel sat by the keyboard and struck the keys blow by blow against her country. Nobody envisioned that that is the way it was going to unfold. You had a bunch of ordinary people suddenly thrust on a world stage. And Ethel was an actress. She wanted to be an actress. And she was much more valuable to the Russians, as I think she knew, as a martyr than she ever was as a spy.
Question?
Well, congratulations to all of you. It was quite wonderful. I have a question. After having seen last night the Central Park 5 and the flaws in our judicial system, again, being reinforced, and I wonder why you minimized that or did not expand on that. And
well, if I can just say very quickly, but anyone feel free. Bill Kunstler would have gotten them off.
Flaws on the legal.
They had a Matty Block who was not a criminal lawyer, and he didn't know much about the case. He impounded the sketch of the atomic bomb because he didn't want to make it look like they were traitors, when in fact all he did was make it more important, made it more of a secret. And the fact is that very, very few scientists, as Ben knows, very few prominent lawyers were willing to go anywhere near this case.
Why did Eisenhower take such a strong stand?
I think he believed they were guilty, and he did not have access to some of the information that would have shown Ethel was not guilty, not legally guilty. Was she morally complicit? I'm sure. She was a communist. She wanted Julius to succeed, but she had a bad back and was taking care of the kids, and I don't think had time to be a spy.
It was such a scary time. I mean, it's hard from this point of view to realize what public panic there was, and how suddenly the Russians were perceived as demons that were going to destroy us.
Last question?
Well, it's not a question, it's an observation of listening to everything that was presented here in Sam's book and the things that have changed in time. The real dilemma is that the justice system, so quickly in those days and now slowly is starting to change. Justice has a responsibility to really attack the true guilt participant. And we have now found out, like the Central Park Five and so many other cases, where energy is now exerted. Energy is now exerted to really define what justice is about. And it's not just putting people in jail or executing them. And this book is really part of what that's all about. Because as you said, John, that time was a frightening time. If you pointed a finger at somebody and said they were a communist, they were defenseless. Mm-hmm. Actors were defenseless. Mm-hmm. If their name appeared on a list, they were defenseless. There was nothing they could do. And the Justice Department, the legal Justice Department, used that. By ultimately their own admission, had abused the responsibility of exercising justice.
Thank you so much. And I would like to say thank you again to everybody here for coming. And to Arthur Gelb for giving the assignment, right?
Probably has 50 copies of
I'm wondering, it's on Kindle. That would be.
Well, indeed.
Michael, you radiate like a sun. It's like a sun coming out through your face.
Yeah. So you guys are going back tomorrow?
No, it's not. I just came in. Dix is home.
Oh, Dix is Rhode Island.
Dix is.
Oh, I thought you guys were going to come down.
We were, except this morning Dix couldn't move. So.
Congratulations. That's everything.